Alright, our next episode is actually the final episode of the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation. That would be episode number 26, called The Neutral Zone. And it was written by Maurice Hurley, and the story was by Deborah McIntyre and Mona Glee, and it was directed by James L. Conway. And plot-wise with this episode, while the Enterprise is basically just hanging in space, waiting to rendezvous with Captain Picard, Picard is returning from a shuttle from a conference at Starbase 718, they encounter a derelict spaceship that happens to be wandering by. And Data and Worf beam over to investigate, and they find containers of frozen people, and there are 3 people who are still functioning, and they haven't rotted away. It looks like that these containers were not intended to keep people alive, and they were just freezers. But 3 people are alive nonetheless from this. So Data requests that they beam these people aboard and try to thaw them out. So Riker is a little hesitant about this because he knows that they're supposed to be picking up Captain Picard any minute, but they decide that they are going to go ahead and do that. And Picard arrives at the ship and immediately sets course for the neutral zone at Warp 8. And he calls a staff meeting and explains that 2 outposts along the neutral zone have been destroyed, and several others haven't been heard from in some time. And after decades of silence, it might be possible that the Romulans may be back. So meanwhile, Dr. Crusher does revive the cryogenically frozen humans, and it turns out they're all from the late 21st century. One is a female who wasn't even aware that she was undergoing this procedure, and is suddenly realizing the fact that she's missing all her boys, and all the people she knew and loved are dead. And there's another man who doesn't seem to be having a lot of trouble coping with this at all, and he was some kind of a country singer back in the day, and he seems to be probably the most humor in the episode, and seems really excited for his new life. And then there is another man named Ralph Oppenhaus, who seems like he is very interested in contacting his bank and seems to think that it's still around. Well, in the meantime, the Enterprise arrives at one of the destroyed outposts, and Worf reports that, quote, "it's as though some great force just scooped it off the face of the planet." And we come to hear a similar expression in a future episode, so remember that phrase described by Worf. Well, the feeling of the increased tension on the ship, because they've changed the ship status to yellow alert, at least. One of the recently thawed men, who is Ralph Oppenhaus, as I mentioned, finds his way to the bridge. He's been causing a lot of problems. For one, he tried to use the comm panel and contacted Captain Picard during the staff meeting, and now he makes his way to the bridge to get some answers. And moments after he does this, Riker orders security to take him off the bridge, and a Romulan warbird materializes in front of the Enterprise. Now the Romulans claim that their outposts have been destroyed also. So when Picard asks if they know who did this, Oppenhaus, who's still on the bridge, he jumps into the conversation and says the Romulans don't know, and they're too proud to ask Picard if he has any information about it. And Picard actually agrees with the assessment, even though that guy's not supposed to be on the bridge. And Picard then suggests that the Federation and the Romulans work together to solve the mystery. Now the Romulans agree, and the warbird flies off, but they do threaten that they are back, so make no mistake about it. So the Federation isn't exactly, they're going to work together on this problem, but they're not exactly allies either. So, as the episode concludes, the Enterprise makes plans to rendezvous with USS Charleston, and the starship will take the 21st century humans back to Earth. And that is basically the plot of the Neutral Zone. Now, this particular episode was originally intended not just to be a one-parter, but to be a two-parter. But because at the time there was going to be a writer's strike, they decided, no, we're not going to do that, and we're just going to make this into one episode. So it really got it really got shortened a whole lot. Originally, the show was going to show from this devastation of the outposts. It was going to allude to the fact that this was going to be the Borg who did this, and we were going to be introduced to them that way through the second season. Obviously that didn't happen, and we saw the Borg in a different way through Q, but that was the original intent. And this particular show was actually written very quickly. In fact, it was written literally in a day and a half, according to Maurice Hurley. So, all things considered with that, I thought it was a really good episode for such a short amount of time given. I really did think there was a lot of humor by one of the 21st century characters there, and his banter with Data I thought was pretty funny. And I wish we had seen a little bit more of the Romulans, but that couldn't be helped, as I had mentioned before. But it is really interesting to see the Romulans finally. And this is kind of a turning point, because you remember at the beginning of the first season, I mentioned that Gene Roddenberry didn't want Klingons and Romulans, the old nemesis of the Federation from the 23rd century, to be present in this show. But they made the decision to change that. At the time, I don't think they found the Ferengi to be strong enough villains to use, although we do see the Ferengi in later seasons and on different incarnations of the show. But this does show the very beginning of the Romulans being an integral part of the Next Generation. And even though we didn't get the payoff of the Borg here like they had originally intended, it is fun to see what they were thinking originally with the Borg with this one. So that is the last episode, guys. The only other thing I'll mention is you may see in this picture on the far left here, that Romulan, that was actually played by Mark Alamo, and he was quintessential in especially Star Trek Deep Space Nine, but he played a number of characters in the Next Generation too. I think Gul Dukat, I think, is the big character that I remember him from most, but he played a number of them. So that's all I have to say about this last episode in particular. But because this is the last episode of the first season, I want to do something kind of interesting with you guys, and I want you guys to comment below on this particular episode. I want you guys to think back from the first season and think about what is your favorite episode from the first season, and just give me maybe a couple sentences telling me why. And what is your least favorite or the worst episode of season 1? I certainly think there were a lot more episodes from season 1 that deserve that. But what's your favorite and your least favorite? And tell me why for both. I would have to say my favorite was Conspiracy. I just think it was different, and I like that kind of horror aspect to it, and you don't see that in any other episodes, so it was very unique. And my least favorite, it's very tough for me to say what my least favorite is. I would probably say maybe Code of Honor, because it's just very uninteresting, and I don't think they did a lot with it, but that's very debatable because there were a lot of bad episodes in the first season. So yeah, comment below your favorite, your least favorite, and tell me why. And thanks for watching the first season reviews of Star Trek The Next Generation. Stay tuned when I begin the second season of The Next Generation. Thanks, guys.